Traders, that's a look at a couple futures markets and a couple stocks that I've got my eye on that I think you should be dialed in on. Now we've got Scott Bauer. He's the CEO of Prosper Trading Academy, joining us for a look at a few he's got his eye on. Scott, welcome. It looks like Goldman got an upgrade, I should say, from Berenberg today. GS, ticker symbol, up around 5%. Last I looked, I can see why they caught your eye.
Yeah, and before I start that, Ben, how can I follow up with anything based on what you were just talking about with Beyond? I mean, that was the most fabulous report. Well done and all that. That's awesome. That's awesome. Now,
Scott,
let's talk about Goldman.
Scott.
You know, listen, everybody can try and pick a bottom in whatever sector they want, and I'm not saying that they did or didn't. However, you look at a stock like Goldman, you look at a stock like JP and maybe even Morgan, and you've got to think that if they're able to withstand the demolition that we've seen with interest rates, they should, in this trading environment, more than make up for that with their trading revenue. I'm an ex-Goldman Sachs trader. Back in the day when we had volatility like this, and I was a Goldman Sachs trader in 08, 09 through the crisis there, we never had trading days, like that time, this volatility. So yeah. I've got to believe that this upgrade really has to be based on trading revenues.
All right, this stock is up almost 7% right now as we speak. Scott, we'll keep an eye on this one. Currently trading 165.92. Let's move on because Intel, INTC, they got an upgrade from Bernstein to market perform from underperform with a target unchanged at $50. What's Scott see in INTC?
I mean, that's not a, raving endorsement of the stock here. However, on this upgrade today, it is higher. Maybe it's also on the heels that, Micron came out with their earnings last night and said guidance was actually pretty good. So technically for Intel here, okay, the stock just traded above the 200-day moving average today, okay? Now, in this type of environment, you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. However, if it can hold there, Ben, then you know what? I like this stock going out at least a month into their earnings, which is literally about a month away from today.
Scott, talk to me. You mentioned above the moving average, but it does look to me like they still have some hurdles to get over. This is one of those stocks that's been on the decline, and much like the broader market, for the most part, we were looking at this earlier in the indices today on the Future Show. We're seeing, again, lower highs and lower lows. I mean, for the most part, these markets have been seeing some selling, and you can see a reflection of that here in terms of how it's been struggling and has seen migration of value to the downside off the 69.29 level, recently off a low right around 44.
And that's exactly why I said this thing has to hold above the 200. If it rejects and comes back down, that's really not a good sign.
All right. Something to keep an eye on there. We'll watch INTC as well. How about KB Homes ahead of earnings? They're up today. Again, they were set to report quarterly results today on the close. Let's talk KBH, Scott.
Yeah, so the market is pricing in about a $4 expected move on earnings one way or the other. And there are no weekly options here. So if you go out to regular April expiration, it's about a $5.50 expected move. Now, year to date, stock's down, about 31% or so. Analyst estimates have been revised higher over the last 90 days. However, the most common rating still out there is a sell. I am not real bullish in KB Homes or, quite frankly, any of the other home builders until we get through this entire coronavirus issue.
Yeah, I can imagine real estate has some, a bit of a patch of bumpy road ahead, to say the least. Speaking of a patch of bumpy road, let's talk employment for a second, Scott, because that number was closely watched today. Jobless claims, I mean, it's going to raise a few eyebrows, to say the least.
I mean, it's so unfortunate, Ben. And I guess this massive number over 3 million was a number that apparently, from what I heard, maybe you heard, didn't quite hit the whisper number, and maybe that's why the market thought that was a good thing. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, and we're going to see this, we're going to see more and more and more of this, and it's just a matter of how much can the market really shrug this off, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we get that adjusted.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see if it can shrug anything off. Scott, I wanted to get back to KBH real quick because ultimately this ties back into what we were just talking about in terms of the jobless claims, in terms of realtors.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed today KBH, they're actually coming off here right now, again, down now by 3.25%. But I'd noticed earlier Pulte was up, but then I looked Lennar and Ameritrade, some of the others were down. So again, I think maybe that just sort of speaks to the space in terms of how a lot to digest here over the next coming weeks and possibly coming months. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, basically.
There's no question about it. And for me, my money's not going into that space. I think it's way too risky. I think there's other places that whether I'm going to trade or I'm going to invest, other sectors that I'd rather look into. But, the home builders to me are have to be one of those top sectors that over the next few months don't do real well.
Yeah, well, we're definitely seeing some movement here. Go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. Go ahead. We're good.
I was going to say, we're seeing some movement here, some, at the very least, intraday volatility. It'll be interesting to see how the dust settles ahead of these earnings today into the close and how they respond to as they stir some up in reaction to quarterly results. Scott, really appreciate you giving us part of your Thursday afternoon. Look forward to seeing you back here in the near futures. Near future traders, that's Scott Bauer. He's the CEO of Prosper Trading Academy. We're going to take a quick